My name is Rachel Hayman, and I am currently a research programme manager at the University of Oxford in the UK. I manage a large interdisciplinary research programme called the Agile Initiative. But before I joined Oxford University back in 2021, I spent 10 years at Intrac, where I was the head and then the director of research and learning. I did a PhD at the University of Edinburgh in African Studies, which was focused on the politics of aid. So I had a really keen interest then in the politics of aid flows, and particularly sort of who's determining the terms of cooperation and how the narrative is set around those who've got the most power. So aid ownership was a really big concept at that time, and it was really incorporated into the research work that I was doing. So that's sort of where my journey in the international sector began. So back in 2011, I hadn't been with Intrac for very long, but a group of European INGOs that we worked closely with on the research side of our work at that time were asking for support and resources around exit planning. We went back, we discovered work that had been done by colleagues at Intrac in the mid-1990s, but basically there was very little around that time that was available for NGOs about how to do exit well, and particularly how to deal with quite sudden and rapid and unplanned exit from different countries. A large bit of my portfolio of work was looking at issues around exit and exit planning, but also sustainability. And that brought me ultimately into contact with Peace Direct and the CDA Collaborative, because as we got sort of further into that time period, this is something that Peace Direct were starting to look at quite a lot as well. So tied through all of that work were whole, emerging debates around shifting the power and localization and decolonisation, and that's really where I really began to connect in with what was going on with SAS at the time. So the first initiative, and really at that moment my primary concern was to ensure that SAS didn't try to duplicate what we'd already done. So I was really concerned about a very strong tendency, I think, within the international NGO sector, which is to fail to look on the shelf. And so when I was in touch with Peace Direct and CDA, I was really keen to make sure that this initiative, SAS, was really building on what already existed and adding to a body of work that was already in existence. But really interesting, really found the work of Stopping a Success really very enriching, actually, in terms of being able to keep involved in a discussion about what's going on in an area that really does interest me very greatly. Perhaps some of the biggest value added that I've seen both of SAS First Phase and SAS Plus has been all of those resources that were produced and that are being built on in this second phase. I think the case studies from Stopping a Success are an extremely valuable resource. And I think it's really important that those continue to be shared, because having more and more examples of organisations that have transitioned through change, hearing those perspectives, different angles, and really having those in-depth case studies available from very different parts of the world as well. And I know the focus with SAS Plus is more on the tools and the guidance materials, but actually having that grounding in really solid examples and really solid case studies is extremely valuable, because it takes it away from the theoretical down to the practical. A lot of NGOs, unfortunately, need motivation and incentive to make these changes. There's a lot of narrative about shifting power and localization and moving resources and ensuring that local partners or organizations in the global south have the power. in practice, that is not happening as much as we would like. There's some really great examples. There's some really, really great examples, but there's an awful lot of poor practice. And also within the aid sector, it's also about the practices of the private sector as well, and different types of organisations that are involved in the aid system in some sort of way. And we really need everybody to be thinking differently about that transition planning and motivations and the values that underpin the way in which resources flow and the types of support that are made available to organisations as they try to deliver their own work on their own terms.